the iSolder Store brand 3 leaves LED gyroscope soldering DIY kit, otherwise known as a fidget spinner with lights. So you can see the finished product there was pretty cool. So here's the PCB, and you see those little dots, those are the resistors. They're 100 ohm resistors, marked 101 on each resistor. I'm showing you the overview for a few seconds, and then I'll go and show the microscope view. So what I'm doing here is putting a little solder on one pad of the surface mount. The idea being to tack each part onto one pad and then turn it around and do the other side nicely, and then go back and do the first side to touch it up a little bit. So you see those tweezers there, and they have a little light in them. They're real nice. They cost like $12, but they really stink for soldering. So I don't recommend them at all. I think they're Cricut brand. They're good for crafts, but they're very hard to control the ends. They're not like longer tweezers. So I'm starting out, I'm pretty steady. So you see me grabbing one of those resistors, and you can see how tiny they are. They're 0603 size or package of resistor, SMD resistor, and so are the LEDs. And they're pretty manageable if you never did surface mount. This is a good kit to practice on. And you get a nice finished product. I really like the finished product. So I'm going to keep it as a lucky charm when I go to gamble and play with it at the gambling table. So you can see I'm tacking on one side of the resistor, and you see this clumsy tweezer is having a hard time getting that resistor in one spot and holding it there in place. It should be once you touch the surface of the PCB with the resistor and the tweezers, it stays perfectly still. So the trick is to have the soldering iron and the solder and the tweezer all perfectly still touching the PCB, and just have it, you only need to hold it steady for 1 split second while it touches the PCB. And here you see I don't have the PCB tacked down. So it kind of worked okay most of the time, but sometimes it moved the PCB board. So moving right along, that one's got a little too much solder, but I'm going to leave it. So the idea here is to just touch the soldering iron to the pad and not to the component. And I don't always do this, but that's what you should aim for. And even that last one you can see is a little too much solder. You just need a little solder, but I like to really lay it on there. So after I finish this, I'm going to go back and touch up the other side that I tacked on. So even though they do have enough solder on them already, I'm adding just a touch more solder to get the flux. Now, ideally what you might do is just put a drop of flux on each joint, and then touch the soldering iron to it real quick, and that'll make it nice and smooth and shiny. Now that one is almost perfect as it is, but you see here I'm adding more solder. So you can see, but that one has too much solder on it, you can see, but I'm going to let it go. It'll still work. So now on to, well, we'll inspect them. They're pretty straight. So now I learned my lesson with the tweezers, and I'm using my regular tweezers again. So these LEDs have to be correct polarity, and the PCB has a little line for the cathode, and the component has a little green spot on the top, which you can almost always see. And if not, you can turn it upside down and there's markings on the bottom that will indicate the cathode. Usually a T or an arrow. So again, I'm tacking down one side. So again, I showed you the overview, and now you're seeing close up. Now there's three different colors. There's red, green, and blue. So now I'm doing the green ones. So you can see that package, and you can't tell here, but the package has a green marker line drawn over it. And the blue one has a blue marker line drawn over it, and the red one has a red marker line drawn over it. So they're easily marked, they're well marked. And you want to be careful taking these out of the package because they fly all over the place. And these 0603 LEDs are a little smaller and harder than the resistors. And you have to be careful with them because they're easy to burn. So what I do is I like to line them up and make sure they're all facing in the right direction. And you can see my hand is pretty steady here now because I'm just starting out. You'll see later on my hand gets a little unsteady. So you see the instructions they give you in the lower right hand corner there. So the thing is, you only need to keep the soldering iron steady for a split second while you touch the pad. And here I'm pressing down on the top of the component and heating up the solder again to get the component level. Now one of them I kind of messed up, but it still works. Now this one is crooked, so I'm going to adjust it. So you really don't need to get solder on the component. Just touch the bottom of it a little bit. Don't touch the soldering iron, and definitely don't touch the soldering iron to the plastic. That will totally burn out the component instantly. So D5 I had trouble with. You can see it's not sticking. And you see I still have that glob of flux on my tweezer. So I'm still going to have trouble with D5 later on, and I'm going to have to go ahead and fix it. D8 is way crooked, so I'm going to go back and fix that. Now from this angle it doesn't look so crooked. But you can see now I'm coming in pretty steady with the tweezers. Soldering iron is shaking a little, but once it's touching the surface, it doesn't shake. So now I've got my 4 green ones on. And you see the green dots, the green markings on the cathode and the white lines on the silk screen. Now the idea here is again to only touch the pad and not the LED with the soldering iron, and just let the solder flow into it. So now I'm going to go back and touch up the other side. So you can see D5 came loose. I will later go back and fix that. I won't show that on the video. So now I'm doing the blue ones. So I don't know, I'm pretty steady there. I get some remarks about my hand shaking. You don't need the steadiest of hands to do this. I mean, you don't have to be a brain surgeon. It's more a matter of practice and skill than of steady hands. I see some guys have really, really steady hands, and I give them credit for that. And there are things you can do to steady your hands. You can do exercises. For one thing, I consume a lot of caffeine. So you can avoid caffeine, and that will make your hands steadier. You can also make sure you rest your elbow on the table and keep the work at the right distance away from you. So here I'm using the tweezers kind of at an awkward angle because I have them upside down. But I'm able to manipulate the pieces. So you see how small those LEDs really are. Those 0603 parts. So here I'm obtaining the, I'm applying solder to one pad. So I'm going to tack each LED onto the pad. So by this point I'm getting the hang of the LEDs. And this will go quickly. Again, I'm tapping down on the top and pressing it down while heating the solder so it goes nice and flat. You want to try to get these lined up as perfect as you can. But I'm no expert. I mean, I just do this for fun. I must have done about 100 of these kits now. Maybe 50 to 100 of these kits. And this is the first one that's really SMD solder that does something practical. I think I did a clock and a speaker that had SMD parts. Some of them will just have the SMD IC on it, and that's good practice too. So we'll get to the IC in a minute. So you can see, just touch the soldering iron to the pad and don't touch the soldering iron to the LED. Go back and touch up the other side. D5 is still messed up. I'm going to fix that off camera. So they really do have enough solder, but you have to go back and touch them up. It's really important. So that one's nice. That one's a little too much solder. That one's way too much solder. So here's the IC. You want the notch to be by the dot, of course. Has polarity, so pin 1 is that upper left-hand corner. So yes, use a little flux. This is no clean flux. It still messes up the board a little, and you should really clean it with a little isopropyl alcohol, but I'm not going to bother on this kit. So get a little solder right on one pad. Then you're going to solder it into place with just that one pad. You want to get it as perfectly aligned as you can. Now this is only a 14-pin IC with, as you can see, no markings whatsoever on it. So it could be the nuclear codes for all I know. So you see I got it a little crooked, but I'm going to fix it. You'll see how I fix it in a minute. So now I'm going to fix it. Watch, I'm going to twist it a little. And let the solder dry, let the solder cool. And now that's pretty nicely aligned. A little more to the left than to the right, but not a problem. So now you just go through, you can go through and do these each one at a time. They're about, I don't know if they're a millimeter or half a millimeter apart. But with the flux on there, the solder will pretty much stay on the pad. And if you get a bridge, don't panic. It's easy to clean the bridges off. I'm not going to show you that because I'm not going to make any bridges. But you're going to see I'm going to mess something up here. Now you see those two pads for the R12. So ideally these are not perfect. These joints, there's a little too much solder on each joint. If you were going to do it with real flux and maybe drag the soldering iron maybe, but you're going to get a little too much solder on each one. So you see what I did on that pad on R12? I got a big blob of solder on there. But that's no problem because I'm going to do that anyway when I put on the resistor. So these are the 10K resistors. You only need one and they give you two. So that goes on R12. And that resistor is for the momentary push button switch that turns it on and off. And it's really nice because the switch is a latch switch. You know, it's a latch circuit. So it goes off just by the touch of a button and on by the touch of a button. So here's a capacitor. It's a 0.1 microfarad capacitor. Now, I may have a little trouble with this capacitor because I'm going back to using that reverse tweezer that I thought would be so cool, and I really don't like it. I really don't like it, and you're going to see why here. Look, it won't stay in one spot. So I'm going to struggle a little with this capacitor. I'm going to try and get it level now, and watch what happens. It's totally crooked. So now I got my other tweezers. I've learned my lesson finally for the last time. So I really want it perfect. So you can see these parts take a beating. And again, I'm only touching the solder and the pad and trying not to touch the edge of the component. So you can see that C1 is still a little crooked, but I'm going to let it go. By this point, I've been soldering for a half hour, and my hands are getting a little shaky. So here it's all done. I'm just doing the touch-up on the first side that I tacked down. Make that nice and shiny. Still a little too much solder, but the experts are the experts. So this is showing you the overall picture of me doing that last bit. And how from close up it looks like I'm shaking a lot, but you can see here I'm hardly shaking at all. So I'm just going to inspect this, and the next step is easy, is to put on the battery holders on the other side. So I'm going to wait and take a break, and now I'm going to put the battery holders on. And you see I've already put them on actually. You see that plus sign. So it's important to orient the battery holders in the right way, because with that momentary push switch there, you would never be able to get the battery in if it wasn't oriented the right way. So you'll see the other two have the plus switch, plus indicator, the plus sign indicator on the outside of the leaf, and this one has the plus indicator on the inside of the leaf. There's actually two pieces that come down and touch the surface of the PCB that hold the battery in place. Now, I had a heck of a time finding CR1620 batteries. I ordered them from Amazon and they never came, and they were such a good deal. It was like $5 for a pack of 5 of them. So I went to my local Walgreens, where I saw on the internet that they had them, and they were like $7 a piece. So I bought 3 of them. Grand total $24. So the tack switch is a piece of cake. You want to make sure it's on flat and straight. You can see I finally cleaned my tweezers. So you can see I have it perfect, but I'm having trouble holding it right in place. That left hand is a little more shaky than the right hand, I think. So again, you only have to touch the soldering iron for a brief second. You have to hold it steady. So you can see that left pin on the upper left side is a little crooked, but I'm going to let that go. So there you go. It's all done. You put the batteries in, test it out, and then put it all together. And here is the finished product. And look at those patterns.